Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Vivian Ballers. It's an international window when you have us producing two videos in such a short amount of time. Today, we have the privilege and honor of being joined by Steve Hahn again, writer for FIFA. He's a good friend of ours. We are going to be actually highlighting the Korea's recent 3-1 match win against Oman. Unfortunately, similar to the Palestine match, due to work conflicts, I couldn't get much viewing in, but Steve got the whole 90 plus all that extra added time in. So we're going to be relying on his expertise today. Steve, how have you been since the last time we saw you on the channel?
What's going on, Jason? Always good to talk to you. Always enjoy our battles on Twitter too. Whenever we get a chance, we don't get to do that often, but always enjoy that. But yeah, I've been good, man. Well, I mean, I've been good. I don't know if Korean football has been good, but yeah, like personally, it's been uh been working on a lot of exciting content, so it's been exciting times for me. But I mean, obviously, this whole situation with the national team, it's not so much the even the result of the games. I mean, obviously, performance was a little bit more problematic, and it's just the fact that like the vibe around the team, it's difficult to deal with. I'm sure you know what I mean, but a lot of it is understandable too. So it's like in a very difficult place, someone like me to kind of navigate through this and still be able to do what I do. But yeah, I mean, no complaints from me, man. Life's been good, and like, how have you been, man?
I've been good. I've been good. Long days, not a lot of sleep, but
I'm sure.
the Korean national team isn't helping my sleep either, so that's a little bit unfortunate.
Not only because they're playing, but just because of yeah, But yeah, we'll talk about it. Just I guess for starters, though, 4 points, huh? Like to start qualifying. 4 points out of two games. The result itself is not the worst result because they played one away, one home game. 4 points, not the worst result. They're still, I think, somewhat on track to for contention to play and play to be in the top two. So whatever, it's not the worst result. I can live with the result, but obviously some alarming signs from the games we've seen. New team, still a little bit early, so I guess we do have to wait and see. But it's always weird, huh? Because like whenever we talk about Korea, it's kind of like, oh, like let's wait and see what happens. Now that's we've been saying that for how long? So yeah, like, but I guess this is really the final straw. Like let's wait and see this. I think this third round AFC qualifying really is like I think we should have a very clear picture of what needs to happen after this round. I mean, we obviously don't know what like if whatever we want will happen, but like I said, let's wait and see. But yeah, definitely many uncertainties, but yeah, the games will continue to happen over the next couple of months. So yeah, let's wait and see, man.
Yeah, like you said, on paper, 4 points out of six against Palestine. Difficult away match against Oman.
Yeah.
I mean, it's led to, the famous phrase, and at least in Korean, Oman shock. Like I think we might have gotten upset by them, and then Japan definitely a couple of
Hmm.
instances, maybe one or two that they've been upset by Oman. So,
Right.
definitely not a couple of easy fixtures. I mean,
Hmm.
I just want to, I guess, know your thoughts. You shared it a little bit, but overall
Yeah.
impression of this window, was it a success, or are we seeing it as the failure that it's being portrayed in Korean media right now?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of impossible to call it a success at this point, because I mean, number one, it's 2 out of 10 games. So and one of them was a home game that they couldn't win. I mean, against a team they were at least, like you said on paper, expected to win. I mean, I don't think it's crazy at all for us to expect a comfortable win against Palestine to start the qualifying campaign. I mean, it didn't happen, but and obviously, not a success. Is it an utter failure? The reason why I said like we gotta wait and see is because look, I mean things didn't go well. I mean, like anyone who says that things went well this window is probably either lying or uninformed, to be honest. But probably not as terrible as it was made out to be. Maybe depending on who you listen to. Because at this point in Korea we call this 최종 예선, which is like the last round of qualifying. That's what Koreans are treating this as. I mean, same with me too, because that's what we're used to seeing at this stage of qualifying. So, um, the fact that they collected 4 points is not a failure, because result is really what matters in these qualifying games. So it's not a failure, but to call it a success would be badly stretching it, I think. And when you look at the performance side of it, I mean, I guess we'll talk about it. But against Palestine, I was disappointed. No question about that. Against Oman, obviously a slight improvement, but I do think Palestine was considerably a better team, at least in this window, than Oman was. I actually expected a little bit more from Oman, to be honest, and not that they were terrible, but I thought they were a better team than that, to be honest. I thought they were going to push Korea a little bit more, because I mean, there was a moment when they were really pushing Korea in the first half, like a good 15 to 20 minutes or so towards the end of the first half. But I actually expected a little bit more from them, you know. But considering all of that, you know, there were some inconsistencies from Korea throughout 90 minutes. I mean, like I talked about, like that little 15-minute window at the end of the first half, and also in the second half too, which, I mean, I guess to be fair, you can expect in an away game of a World Cup qualifying, but at the same time, you know, the expectation, or the hope at least, is when Korea's pinned back against a team like Oman or even Palestine, I think the aim or the expectation should be to at least, for the most part, still be able to weather the storm. But, you know, given that expectation, I think they could have done a lot better than they did. But, it's like, let's, to be completely fair to the players and also the coaching staff, 1 day of training, and it was like almost like a half-ass training before they went into that game against Palestine, and then they flew out to Oman the next day. So it was a very difficult preparation process, like the players talked about. But performance is a performance, and result is a result. So the expectation is still there, but I wouldn't say the expectations were fulfilled 100%. So from that standpoint, there's, I guess, a lot of improvements to be made.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it perfectly. I mean, I covered the Palestine match in detail with Albert and Paul Jung.
Right.
Just the disappointment that it was. I mean, just on paper, with the caveat that football is, so much more than formations, but formation-wise, similar between Palestine and Oman. Hong Myung-Bo likes to play with that back four, three in the midfield, basically a 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 variation. The changes that Hong made, he made, I think, three or four. Park Young actually came in for Chung Woo-young. Oh Seun came in for Ju Min-gyu, and then Son Heung-min. Obviously he changed his position so much with Korea during the matches, but at least at the start of the game, he played more centrally against Oman compared to playing out wide left against Palestine, and then finally Chung Seung-young coming in for Kim Young-gon. I mean, what changes did you want to see Hong make from Palestine to Oman, and then were you happy with the changes that he actually did make?
Yeah, you mean in terms of the starting lineup, comparing two games, right?
Starting lineup,
Well, I mean, I
tactics,
was
everything.
honestly a little bit, yeah, a little bit surprised, to be honest. I mean, and I mean, I think you know me a little bit by now too. Like, I'm usually not the sort of person who likes to question player selection a whole lot, but at the same time, the starting lineup against Oman, it was a little bit puzzling to me, because, I mean, we're in a situation where we're continuing to select players like Kim Young-won, Jung Woo-young, some of the aging players, which the idea itself I'm okay with. Like, I don't have a whole lot of complaint about that, because I do think veteran presence is very important, especially in a situation like this where a lot of things are against the team. So like, I do understand selecting a lot of those players, but what I didn't understand, this could be nitpicking too, I guess, but the fact that those guys started at home against Palestine. I mean, granted, the game didn't go too well, but that they didn't start against Oman was a little bit strange to me. I personally think it would have made a little bit more sense if those guys didn't start at home against Palestine, give them a little bit more time to settle in, bring up their fitness, and if they started in Oman, I think that makes theoretically a little bit more sense to me, because away game World Cup qualifying is a lot tougher than it seems to us. You know what I mean? You got to fly out there, adjusting to the climate there and just the atmosphere and all that. It's difficult, and you have 1 or 2 days to train there. So I feel like the experience of guys like Kim Young-won, Chung Woo-young, and guys like that would actually help in a game like that. Not only, and not only in terms of experience, but I think tactically it also made a little bit more sense to start those guys in this game more so than the Palestine game. Just because, so here's the thing, like tactics. We saw, Hwang Eun-bum and Park Young-woo playing sort of like, I guess you can call it at the back of the midfield. But Hwang Eun-bum continued to get, or he plays naturally this way too, but he has this drift towards the right side. Like he likes to go wide to the right side a lot, and he's told me this before too, that he likes the way he plays a lot more when he plays off of the right side. So I think it's a bit of a natural tendency, and also tactics too. So he continued to get pulled to the right wing, which was probably needed because he had to provide cover behind the right back too. But what we weren't getting on the left side is Park Young-woo does not have the mobility to provide that kind of coverage. He has a completely different physique compared to Hwang In-bum, so it makes sense. And just stylistically, he's not that sort of a player, and he just doesn't have the motor and the mobility to move around the way Hwang In-bum does in midfield. You know what I mean? So I feel like, we had that conversation on Twitter about Park Young-woo yesterday, but I feel like the way you use a player like Park Young-woo, when you use him as a lone number six, as a lone defensive midfielder, the sort of player who kind of, moves from left to right, but he's in a centralized position. I don't think that role really suits him to be. I think in that role, it's a lot more likely that he's going to be error prone because he's playing a position. I feel like he's playing a position, especially when he's playing that position for the national team. It puts him in a really difficult position. Like he's being required to do things that he's not very good at. And obviously in this game, that coverage on the left wing wasn't happening. It just, it just didn't happen, and that's why we saw Lee Myung-jae was a bit of a. I felt like Lee Myung-jae's performance was a little bit mixed too. I think he had some moments he had some good moments going forward, but defensively it was a struggle for him, and a lot of that was because the support wasn't there. And you got to think about it too. Lee Myung-jae is a 30-year-old player, which is not old, but it's an age that you expect a player, like him to be a little bit more experienced, I guess, but he's not really an experienced player when you look at his profile because I think he debuted earlier this year for Korea. So he needs a lot of help, but he wasn't getting that from Park Young-woo. And I feel like it wasn't actually the fault of either of these two players, the reason why that actually happened. And Kim Min-jae got pulled to the left side. He was being asked to play as the left-sided center back, which he's definitely capable of. He's played that role for Napoli. He's played that role for Bayern Munich, and previously for Korea and other clubs as well. But I think the change was a little too sudden because he played on the right side alongside Kim Young-won against Palestine, and then all of a sudden he moved over to the left side playing with players that he's not too familiar with. You put him on the left side and you pair him up with a player like maybe like Kim Jin-soo that he's been playing with and have Chung Woo-young in front of him. I think that gives him a little bit more familiarity in terms of, giving him an idea of what to do. But these three guys on the left side, Lee Myung-jae, Kim Min-jae, and Park Young-woo, the cohesion just wasn't there defensively. And I think that's what really Oman was exploiting it, to be honest, in the last 15-minute period in the first half, because that's what really killed us in that game. Almost killed us in that game. I think that was a mistake by Hong Myung-bo in terms of the decision that he made to have a unit of three players who don't have a whole lot of experience of playing together in an away game as you're starting off this qualifying campaign. I don't think that was a good idea, and that almost put him in some serious trouble because if Korea didn't win this game, wow, man, like it it would have been bad. It would have been bad.
It would have
But
gotten
yeah,
very, very ugly.
yeah,
I mean, personally, for me, I thought that, Palestine game, there's just nothing to talk about. Like you said, the players had minimal training.
yeah,
You just barely talk tactics, in that training session. It's all about recovery can we get the players in the best fitness for this game? And it's been well documented that just no matter who the manager is, even Paulo Bento had trouble, with that first international match back. So, I don't really want to fault Hong Myung-Bo for the disastrous display against Palestine. I actually thought that watching, the match against Oman, I thought that a little bit more of Hong Myung-Bo's color, his football style, we were able to see without getting, too technical, but directly using the words of, again, Im Sang and Hong Myung-Bo. I thought, he used the Labol Piana a bit more. And then for viewers who are, again, unfamiliar with that, the two center backs, Kim Min-jae, Chung Seung-yeon, spreading out wide. And we had Park Young-woo dropping in between then. The fullbacks pushed out really, really wide, which allowed Sonny and Lee Gang-in to operate a little bit more centrally. And then Hwang Hee-chan, Son Heung-min, Lee Gang-in, they were switching all over the place. And then you had that target man, Oh Se-hoon, in the middle. My problem with this tactic of Hong Myung-bo's, Steve, for me is it's way too easy to exploit. Maybe it's because he just hasn't had time to train with these players, but it reminds me a lot in a way of watching Ange Postecoglou's football with Tottenham. Not that the attacking football is as glamorous or as exciting, but I mean the defensive vulnerability, the gaps in the midfield, the way the opposition is so easily able to counterattack against us. I mean, do you
Right.
think that his football vision, his tactics going forward, it's a fit for firstly, qualification against Asian teams, but against the more strong teams in the World Cup. I mean, it just seems like that 4-1 defeat against 4-2 defeat against Algeria all over again in 2010. I want to know your thoughts on
I
that.
mean, your assessment of the game against Oman, I think I agree with a lot of what you said. And I just think, yeah, you talked about how they were vulnerable to Oman's in transition at their counterattacks. My issue with the lineup, honestly, was that, I mean, I just talked about the defensive side of it too, but in advanced positions, like you said, there was Oh Se-hoon and Hwang Hee-chan playing off of him. On the left side, there was Son Heung-min, and on the right side, Lee Gang-in. These four guys, obviously four good players, no doubt about that. I'm not sure if it was lack of instruction from Hong Myung-bo. I'm not sure if it was lack of clarity in terms of tactics or players being not fit enough for this, or maybe the players are still building cohesion. I don't know what this is. I'm gonna have to start asking some questions, but their pressing was it either came too late or it just wasn't good enough. And that put a lot of pressure on the guys behind them too. And I'm not faulting the forwards of the team, but it just feels like, because when you go back to 2021 and remember that game against Iraq, that very first game we played in the same round for the previous qualifying campaign, the way that Palestine game played out was actually very similar to that 0-0 draw against Iraq. But the difference is, I'm not even gonna lie, the difference is, even during those struggles at the time, how many years ago was this? 4 years ago, I guess now. Bento's team always had a framework in terms of where does this team start pressing? How are they gonna press? In what shape will they press the opposition when they start their attack? I didn't see a whole lot of that against Oman, and that to me is a big concern, because if this team, because the standard for these players has gone up, because I mean, obviously, because a lot of these guys are playing in Europe under good managers now. But not only that, I mean, they spent 4 years against this Portuguese manager who was harping on playing this way for the longest time. So that is where their standard is, and if they come in to a situation just like Jurgen Klinsmann, where players themselves have to discuss how they're gonna strategize a game. If it becomes, I don't know if it got that far with Hong Myung-bo in this camp, but if it gets to that level again, then this is gonna get really ugly. Because when Korean players, just from a cultural standpoint too, I hate to generalize, but from a cultural standpoint, if these guys have to take the initiatives in terms of coming up with the game plan and things like it, it's not gonna go well. It's just not. So if that's what this is gonna turn into, then look no further. Immediate change has to be made. But obviously, for us to discover that, we're gonna need some time because we don't know what we're gonna get with this team right now. And I guess that's another frustration. So that's kind of where we're at. A lot of uncertainties. Um, obviously there are things to hope for too, but yeah, it's a lot of things are a little murky right now. And is it promising? It's kind of hard to say that things are promising, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I think, even when he was with Ulsan Hyundai and he won those two K-League titles, I think a lot of the criticism that Hong Myung-Bo had was he lacked 세부 전술. I think that's the exact Korean term, and that, you know, I think you described it, perfectly a couple of minutes ago, in that he doesn't give like exact instructions to his forwards. He relies more on their individual brilliance and their creativity. And I mean, there's pros and cons to that. A pro is, there is a lot of room for creativity. It doesn't restrict the players. But at the same time, if there isn't a structure or an infrastructure for them to express their creativity, it just becomes a hot mess. And, it's concerning to me because it's not dissimilar to what we've seen under Jurgen Klinsmann. Where Jurgen Klinsmann, okay, Hong Myung-Po is definitely better than Jurgen Klinsmann. You and I are probably better than Jurgen Klinsmann. But it's still concerning, like you said. Is this are these instructions going to come from the assistant, the domestic assistant coaches that he hired, whether it's Park Kwon-ah or Park Dong-jin, I think, or is it
Dongjin, yeah.
coming from the Portuguese managers, the assistant managers that he hired? We really don't know. I mean, so for you, Steve, like if it's not coming from Hong Myung-bo, is there any hope that it's going to come from anyone else?
Well, like I mean, I was maybe a little slight off topic, but I was talking about this yesterday, and what I said was, I mean, we have players that are pretty brash now. Unlike a lot of the players that we've had before. I mean, regardless of what happens in this third round of AFC qualifying, by the end of this round, I'm being serious when I say this. I really think the KFA, whoever is there to do this, needs to sit down with the players and speak with them. So this is the situation. This is the where we are. We've seen this under this new coach over the last year or so, because by the end of this round, it'll be about a year under Hong Myung-Bo. What do you guys think? Do you guys have the confidence that we can go to the World Cup next year and actually do something there? And if the players' answer is, I don't, because this conversation has taken place before in 2018 when Kim Pang-won was there. And if the players' answer is no, we don't think we can do that, then you have to make the change. Because if the players are open about their, I guess, lack of support for the manager, then that manager has no chance of succeeding. And the very hopeful part for me when Hong Myung-Bo was hired the way he was hired when that happened was that, hey, this is a guy who can garner the respect of the Korean players at least. But if he can't do that, then there's really no other way. And obviously it's not the best situation to change the manager with a year to go until the World Cup. But if we get to that point and that's the situation, I mean there's really no more debate for me. You have to pull the trigger, because if after 1 year he hasn't earned the respect or the trust of the players, because trust is one thing, respect is another. I mean, I'm quite sure most of these Korean players actually have big respect for him, but to trust him as a coach who can lead them to success at a World Cup is completely a different proposition. So if a year from now the players are willing to tell the KFA, I don't think it's going to happen under him, then you have to make the change. You absolutely have to make the change, because if you knowingly go to a World Cup knowing that the players don't have the biggest faith in the manager, I mean, who do you even have to blame when that's the case? You know what I mean? So I really think KFA's last chance. I mean, whoever's in charge of the KFA next year, I don't know who that's going to be, to be completely honest with you, but whoever's there, I think that conversation absolutely has to happen. Like, they're going to have to speak with the players, because right now, this vibe around the team, including myself, you, everybody, I don't think we can really see this straight right now because there's so much drama, so many little things that have happened here and there, so many things that are just like distracting us from seeing this straight. I think the only people that can actually see this straight and know if we actually have a chance at the World Cup once we qualify, it's the players. So you speak with the players after third round AFC qualifying, whether we finish in the top two or we don't, or we're headed to the fourth round or whatever. I think you got to speak with the players, and if the players say they're hesitant about really trusting Hong Myung-Bo as their manager at the World Cup, then you absolutely have to make the change. Or that's at least that's the way I look at it.
I mean, that's super interesting that you bring that up. I mean, back in 2018, we had Kim Pang-gon, and I guess he went to the players and said, do you have confidence that 2018 or is it 2022 that you're talking about, Steve?
2018 when there were talks about Shin Tae-yong, whether we keep him or we don't keep him, and if we don't keep him, who do we go for? When all that situation was going on, my understanding is that Kim Pang-gon sat down with some of the players, not all of them, but he sat down with some of the most influential players. I mean, you probably have a very good idea of who those players are at that time in 2018. And the player's answer was, I mean, I can't really name the player, but the player's answer was their general consensus was that we like Shin Tae-yong as a guy. He's a good coach, no doubt about that. It's not like nothing personal against him. We like him. He's good, but we can do better. Quality of training can be better. Just the way the team is set up to play in these games, it can be better. And the general consensus was that we feel like we still need to kind of lean on a coach from a more experienced background to come in and lead us and to kind of show us the way. That was sort of the response that my understanding is that that was what KPG heard from the players. And the result of that was, I mean, a whole lot of other names that he went after, but he ended up with Paulo Bento and turned out quite well, I think.
Turned out okay. Yeah, I mean, that's super nice to hear, but also concerning to hear because back then we had Kim Pang-gon. Guy is, natural leader, has the charisma. He's able to, be humble enough to go to the players and ask their opinion, but also ruthless enough to say to Shin Tae-yong, thank you for everything you've done. We're going to head in another direction. But if you look at the leaders right now we have in the KFA, who is going to do that? And most likely it's going to be up to Im Seng. But the problem is Im Seng is the one that begged Hong Myung-Bo to come to the national team. So, I mean, I would love for that to happen, Steve. I really, really would. But man, unless there's major overhaul, unless there's something that happens with this, government investigation into the KFA and Chong Mong-gyu is no longer able to, run for the fourth consecutive time, then I just don't see how these conversations take place and who are going to lead these conversations. So going off of that, let's say that Hong Myung-bo is our guy and he has to earn the respect and the trust of our players. Where does he start? What do you want to see in October? Could be tactics, could be player selection, it could really be anything. What do you think that Hong Myung-bo has to do in October to lay the foundations, of going in the right direction?
Yeah, I think October it could either be the turning point or things could actually be worse because October it's against Jordan and Iraq, right? I'm getting that right?
Yes, yes.
I mean, these are two of the best teams in this group that we're expected to compete against for top two places, and we play Jordan away first, and then we fly into Korea and play against Iraq, a team that we couldn't beat at home last round of qualifying. I mean, for the previous cycle for 2022. If he doesn't collect, I mean, I shouldn't say he because I shouldn't single him out, but if we don't collect 4 points from these two games, I mean, you go over there, you lose in Jordan, you come home and beat Iraq. That's that still makes me very nervous. But if he doesn't win either of these games, I mean, then you have to have a conversation like that. That conversation that I just spoke about needs to happen sooner. because after what we saw this month, which, like I said, wasn't it wasn't the most terrible of results, to be honest. But for us to go into October in this situation with this atmosphere surrounding the team and not be able to win either game, I think is yeah that really makes things difficult for Korea. And my expectation is that they collect at least 4 points, but I'm not sure if that's an expectation or wishful thinking at this point, to be honest. But I do expect them to play better. That's an expectation because the players based in Europe, for them to make that trip to Jordan, it's a much shorter trip. They're gonna have more time to prepare, not a whole lot more, but they will have more time to prepare for this game. And the KFA is flying a chartered flight for this game, for the game against Iraq, so the players will actually somewhat be taken care of as they fly into Korea for this for the game against Iraq too. So though I do expect better performance from the team, especially with the players based in Europe having another month, into the season at their respective clubs too. So I do expect, I don't know by how much, but I do expect a noticeable improvement in performance. A lot of what we saw maybe in the first 15 to 20 minutes of, the game against Oman, I expected to see that kind of be more of a 60 to 70 to 80-minute performance, at least against Iraq at home. I mean, in Jordan against Jordan, I mean, we saw what happened against Jordan 2 times against the Asian Cup. I mean, we couldn't beat that team both times. So if you go in there and if it's a struggle and you walk out of there with a point, I would still be disappointed, but it wouldn't piss me off as much as it would normally piss me off. You know what I mean? Under these circumstances. Yeah, but if they drop a game, or even one game, or if they don't win both of these games, I you have to have a conversation, really. And yeah, it's really hard to say though, because yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. It's yeah, like, cause like I said, I'm actually curious after this camp, because I spoke with Lee Jae-sung after he met with Hong Myung-Bo like a couple weeks ago. I'm almost wondering, what is he thinking now? You know what I mean? What is he thinking after he's spent some time with him? I mean, it wasn't a whole lot of time, to be honest, but he spent, I guess, like almost a week, a little less than a week, I guess, with him. I do wonder because the conversation that I had with Lee Jae-sung, it was kind of surprising because he was very honest with me, surprisingly, because I didn't think he was gonna be honest with me at that point, like before the camp. But what he said was, I spoke with Hong Myung-Bo, we had good conversation. Obviously I have tremendous amount of respect for him for what he's done for Korean football. And, obviously there's nothing personal. Like him, he was a good man. I spoke with him. We have a good relationship. But when we actually meet him with the team, he could be a different person. That's what he said. And that kind of got me thinking. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, that open and that honest already from the get-go, and we haven't even played a game yet. After a full camp, I'm wondering, what are these guys really thinking? Because that's really important to me. Because, I mean, not because players' opinion is always important, but because, dude, when it comes to the relationship, like, if the relationship with the manager and the team is not there, especially for Korean players, this team has no chance of succeeding at the World Cup. I mean, like, we're talking about the World Cup, but I'm not even sure if they can get through this if that's the situation. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that they have a bad relationship right now, but I do wonder, where is this relationship at right now? Because, like I said, after a year, I want to know what these guys are really thinking. I mean, I don't have to know, but the KFA has to know, and they have to make a decision based on that. I almost feel like this conversation that we talked about with, the necessary conversation that the KFA has to have with the players at some point, I almost feel like this has to be an ongoing dialogue, starting whenever that is. There has to be someone who's talking to the players. And that could be, one of the coaches, that could be somebody at the KFA, a team manager, whoever it may be. There has to be somebody who checks up on players to kind of audit this situation, because so many voices around the team right now, so many uncertainties, so much negativity. We kind of have to look after what's going through the players' heads. I think that's really important. So, what do I expect in October? I expect a minimum of 4 points. But at this point, because we're so not sure about what's really happening, I'm not sure if that's an expectation or a hope. So that's sort of like my situation right now.
And then finally, Steve, to end off, a little bit of a sadder one, but I want to know your thoughts on Sunjino. I think strictly from a football perspective, we this team misses him so much. I think that,
Oh yeah.
he would be so perfect or way better fit than at least what we have for, that central defensive midfielder, the destroyer role that we so desperately need in this
Mm-hmm.
Korean national team. Just
Mm-hmm.
someone who can break up transitional
Mm-hmm.
attacks from the other team, someone who can cover a lot of ground, someone who is able to protect the back four. Because frankly, Chung Woo-young and Park Yun-ho, like you said, they do not have the mobility, whether it's age or body profile or whatever. But we've seen that Son Jin-ho can be that player. I mean, to quickly recap for our viewers, he was detained by the Chinese government, the authorities for accepting bribes. I think he was in China for, I think, for a year or maybe more. But you would know way better than me, Steve. And then now it looks like they've made a decision in court, and the Chinese Football Association is looking to ban him permanently, to the point where he might have to retire from professional football. So, can you give our viewers a little bit of an update there, Steve? And if there is any hope that we can see Sun Jin back with the national team, before the 2026 World Cup?
Yeah, you're right that it's actually a very sad situation, for a number of reasons. But yeah, just to recap, like the situation, just to add to what you explained, the reason why, um, especially us Koreans, the reason why we've been so critical of the Chinese authorities is because here's a national team player who's incarcerated in China, and we didn't get any explanation as to what he did exactly. And then he was pretty much released out of nowhere back in March. You know what I mean? Like we didn't even hear how did you get freed up like after a year? Like what happened? It was like one of those situations. And then obviously we just assumed that it was as is a lot of a lot of the weird things that happened out of China. We just assumed that, oh, it's just another one of those really just unfortunate circumstances that happened in China, but he's back. Things are back to normal. I think what a lot of us, if not all of us, were thinking at that point. But I mean, this news that came out a couple days ago, like you said, the CFA though actually they already banned them permanently within China, and I don't even know how I should say it. It's not an appeal. I'm not sure if saying that they've reported him to FIFA is the right wording. I feel like they just informed FIFA of the penalty that they levied on Son Juno at this point, and now it's up to FIFA and AFC to make the call and say, hey, we're gonna do what the CFA did, and these are match fixers, so we're gonna have to ban all these players. Or like, is it gonna take time, or are they gonna come up with a different verdict? We don't know that yet. But I'm hearing different opinions on this from various people. There are people familiar with similar cases in China. Who these people say, oh, some of the foreign players who've been involved in similar situations haven't been banned that way. So I mean, I felt like, oh, so like, is that right? But then I'm listening to Son Juno because he had a very random press conference yesterday after CFA made that announcement. I'm almost wondering, like, why didn't you have this press conference in March when you first came back to Korea? But I guess there was some fear from him, that a lot of things were unclear. He was freed out of nowhere, so like I get that it took him a little bit of time, but I'm listening to his story and I'm just like, dude, like. First you're saying that you sent 40 grand to your random friend in China who you don't even talk to anymore. But I mean, I'm not even gonna get into the personal stuff. Like, you don't remember why you gave him $40,000, and you got $20,000 back, but you do not know why you received that. You don't remember why you received that much money. And your agent is sitting there saying, "Oh, because he's always traveling back and forth between Korea and China. He didn't really have a good feel for the Chinese currency." I mean, these are words that came out of their mouth. That's it. I mean, I don't know. I don't live that kind of life where I make that kind of money, especially in a place like China. But I'm not sure if that makes sense to me, to be honest. like off this, just going by like my initial impressions, like you don't remember why you sent that much money to your friend, and you don't remember why you received that much money from your friend? Like, really? Like, I mean, maybe it's true. Like, I don't have any evidence to prove that you're lying, and I don't want to think that you're lying because I actually really like him as a player. You know what I mean? Like you just said. But it's like, dude, like, can we really believe him at this point? And I almost feel bad because I've been criticized. I've been very critical of the Chinese authorities, and I'm not sure if I can continue to do that because it almost looks to me like table has turned. We're gonna have to wait and see, like, until we have more information. But Song Juno's camp is already saying that they don't want to release the full sentencing that was issued by, the Chinese authorities. And that's another weird thing in all of this, Jason. Like, really, like, why not? You're telling us that you're innocent, and you're telling us, all these things that the Chinese authorities did to you. Why can't you release whatever information that's on there? Because, I mean, if there's a lie on there, still release it and tell us what it is. But if you're gonna hide that from us, I mean, I don't know if that leaves me with any room to trust them anymore, because it's hard for me. But I don't want to be critical of them either, so it's a very difficult situation for all of us, I think. Because like you said, and then comes football, the actual game. Because this team needs a player like him, and there aren't that many players like him in Korea, really. He may be the only player who plays the way he does. And to be fair to you, Jason, in terms of Park Young-woo, I do completely understand that he's the sort of player who you have to pair up if you're gonna use him as like a double six. Because if you give him the sole responsibility to stand in front of the back four and kind of play that sweeping defensive midfielder role, like we just talked about, he doesn't have the mobility to play that role. I think he's at his best when he's paired up with another midfielder, not Hwang In-bum. But here's the thing: the reason why Jung Woo-young worked well is actually because, even though he's a little bit similar in style with Park Young-woo, is because he was put together with Hwang In-bum and Lee Jae-sung, two of the most dynamic players that Korea has. But when you put Hwang In-bum next to him and you have Hwang Hee-chan in front of these two, it's very likely that Park Young-woo's lack of mobility is just going to expose him defensively. And that's what we saw. That's what we saw at the Asian Cup. That's what we saw again against Oman. So a player like Son Juno, Korea definitely needs. And it almost sounded to me like Hong Myung-Bo didn't really say this, but it sounded to me like Hong Myung-Bo considered him. But there was like he said, there was probably risk there, and it makes, like, I had no idea what the hell he was talking about when he said this. Like, I was like, what is this guy saying? Like, what risk is he talking about? But like now I guess this is what he was actually referring to. So from a football perspective, we definitely need a player like him. There's no doubt about that. Because I mean, we had that conversation about Park Young-woo, but reason why I said Park Young-woo may be a necessity for Korea is because I feel like he's a player that you could bring on when you have to sit on a lead, and you pair him up with a mobile midfielder, and I feel like he's the kind of player who's going to retain possession for you and just help you protect the game that you've already created, maybe in the second half or something. A little bit, I mean, radically different, but also kind of similar to how, I mean, this may not be a good comparison, but how Pep Guardiola used to use. There was a player by the name of Seydou Keita at Barcelona when Guardiola was starting out there. He would start anywhere from like only to like 10, 15 games in a season, but he would play over 30, 40 games. And Guardiola used him for that kind of purpose. Bring him on in the second half with a very specific role, kill the game off. You know what I mean? So Park Young-woo is definitely not the answer as the number 6 for this team. And Chung Woo-young, I mean, you guys all know I like him, but we cannot bank on him going into the next World Cup because age is there, lack of mobility issue is there. So we're gonna have to start preparing some alternatives there. And I'm not sure if Hong Myung-Bo has the resources to do that right now, because there aren't many good defensive midfielders in the K-League right now. It may have to be a situation where you have to just take an existing player and turn him into a defensive midfielder. I think it really just got to that point, to be honest.
Yeah, so many problems, so many variables, factors with this national team, Steve. and not a lot of time, and more importantly, not a lot of leadership. It's concerning, but the best we can do and the most we can do is just hope and support this team and just, hope that the players can figure it out, even if there's, so much incompetence and negligence going on above their heads. We've already gone over time. As we always do, talking about the Korean national team. Thank you again, Steve, for joining us. Before we end off, can you update our viewers on what you're up to and where they can find you?
Yeah, like I said, recently interviewed Lee Jae-sung. You can come read that on FIFA. It's also, it's funny because I asked people on Twitter to send me their questions for Lee Jae-sung, and then I never shared his answers. I'm gonna do that like this week. So you can check us out. Like I said, FIFA.com/KO. That's the Korean edition. FIFA.com/EN. That's obviously the global edition. Check out our work there. I'm on Twitter. Been on Twitter a little bit more than I've been accustomed to in the last month or so. You can find me. My Twitter handle is real Steve Scores. Yeah, you can find me on there. Yeah. Twitter, FIFA.com. That's probably where you can find me the most. For now, might have some news later. On some of the projects that I'm working on. But yeah, two platforms where you could probably find me. Twitter, I'm a little inconsistent. Sometimes I'm just like gone for weeks, and then I'll come back, tweet like 500 times in a day, and then I'll disappear again. But like you'll find me on FIFA. You'll find my work on FIFA.com a lot. But yeah, feel free to hit me up anytime on Twitter. Always love the engagement. Always love. I mean, I don't always love the engagement, to be honest. I shouldn't lie, but I do enjoy speaking with a lot of you. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you ever want to talk about whatever related to Korean football. And yeah, always enjoy talking to you, Jason. This was fun, and yeah, just feel free to hit me up anytime.
Yeah, you will always be, a welcome guest on BB Ballers. In terms of our stuff, guys, we have a couple of exciting videos coming out. I know Albert recently went to Germany. He has an exciting, interview coming out with that. That's actually in collaboration with Steve. And of course, we'll be previewing and then highlighting everything that happens in the October international window as well, where we will face Jordan and Iraq as we continue our journey to the 2026 World Cup. For now, guys, make sure to like and subscribe to Booming Ballers, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.